Hey guys, welcome back. Today's video is going to be about a commission I recently got from a customer who wanted their fursuit sculpted into an action figure. So of course I jumped on that opportunity and I'll take you through the process, so stay tuned. Alright, so for the parts I used Sculpey Original. The fursuit's actually white, so this is the reason why I use Sculpey Original. And you can find it in any sort of craft stores around you and online. In Australia it's about $20 to $25. Don't know about the States, but yeah, I don't normally work in Sculpey, but I enjoy the change and also the challenge of actually using a different material. And the funny thing is, I actually sculpted this head 3 times because I wasn't happy with the first 2. So yeah, 3rd time lucky, and I was quite happy with the way it turned out. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm actually establishing the way the head sits on the neck joint, and I wanted it to still be articulated, so I had to figure out a way for it to still move and for the Sculpey not to restrict the movement of the neck. So I'm actually making a little hole, as you can see, within the head where that ball joint goes into, and the final thing will be hot glued, or however the customer wanted to attach the head. You can either hot glue it or you can use epoxy on the ball end and just attach it that way. Alright, so I'm just going to make some indentations of where the eyes are going to go. So these eyes will be like a teal coloured enamel sort of look. So that's why I didn't use any glass or anything, because the customer wanted to actually paint this doll up herself. So I'm just using a little ball tool to make some indentations. Now I'm just going to map out where the mouth parts and the nose are going to go. So I'm going to attach the lower jaw separately, and this fursuit has its mouth open, so it's going to include some teeth and an open jaw, so that's going to be a really fun thing to do. So what I'm doing is I'm just sculpting the top part of the jaw. So I'm just carving away at the excess clay, and I'm using this, it's kind of like a little knife tool that's made from stainless steel. I found it on eBay just for a whole set, and you can get it pretty cheap, so just have a look around on eBay where you can find some dentistry tools which come in handy. Right, so now I'm just sculpting out the eye socket area of, the tear duct bit, and I'm using this other little dentistry tool that's like a spatula type thing. I really like this tool because it comes in handy for the tear duct areas like that. So again, you can probably find it on eBay. Moving on to the ears, and this fursuit had quite large ears, and it had the tips of the ears that were 2 separate parts, so something different and something pretty fun to sculpt. So first of all I just establish the shape, and then I will refine it a little bit more once I have the shape and the symmetry right. So I like to get both ears on first, just so I know everything's symmetrical and looking good before I continue doing any more refining work. Now, I actually didn't pre-bake any of these parts, I just sculpted it all in one go, but if you are not really confident and you wanted to pre-bake your parts at a step at a time, feel free, definitely do it. I just chose not to do it this way. And moving on to the nose area, so I'm just building up on that snout area, and it turned out really well. So I'm gonna do a little slow-mo, not a slow-mo, but real time of sculpting the nose out, because I think some of you will find that quite helpful to see a close-up slow version of sculpting a cat nose. And what I'm using here is a little it's kind of like a fabric pick tool, but you can find any pin tool anywhere, you know, it comes in handy, so definitely pick one up. I'm also using this little ball tool, and this ball tool is from the brand Sculpey, but you can find them on eBay for cheaper. You don't have to get the Sculpey ones because they're a bit of a rip-off, to be honest. So there's no right or wrong way of sculpting a cat nose. I've just chosen this way to cut out rather than build up in this particular sculpt, but you know, you don't have to do it that way at all. So I'm using this little pick tool to just map out where the cat nose is, and I find it helpful to just sort of draw it onto the clay and then take away from the clay piece itself to bring out the features of the nose. So the beauty of using Sculpey Original is it's quite soft, so you don't need a harsh rake tool to take away from the clay pieces. So if you're using Super Sculpey or Sculpey Firm or anything that's harder than those two, I'd suggest using a stronger rake tool, which you can make yourself, but I might do a video in that in the future. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below if you want me to show you some rake tools. So I'm just carving out, you know, the little bits that go into the snout on the sides of the nostril. And again, this pin tool is really great to get in there. So I'm also just widening the nostril area with that pin tool. You know, you can use any other tool, you can use that ball tool, but I find the pin tool easier to be able to scrape out that extra clay that's in there. So for the teeth, I'm going to be using a translucent Fimo, and again, you can find it at any old craft store or online. So here's a little jaw piece, and I've sculpted it out and attached the teeth down below. So I'm just making sure it fits properly and then blending it into the actual head piece. And because I haven't pre-baked anything, it blends in quite nicely with any old tool, even your finger. So no problems there. Right, so you can see here how easy it is to blend into any old piece. Now I'm adding the top teeth to the top part of the jaw, and I don't know why I didn't add them in the first place when the lower jaw was off. I just guess I like making things difficult for myself. So what I did is I made a little pinhole in the top of the jaw, and I'm just adding the teeth into that pinhole. Alright, so I'm just going to pop in those little eyeballs, and here is what the piece looks like so far. And you know, I've still got a bit of work to do around the eyes and the nose area and the ears and stuff. So what I'm doing now is, the fursuit had a little, sort of like my dolls, just a little waterline, black waterline that is surrounding the eyepiece. So again, it made it pretty easy because it was very similar to my dolls, and this is how I sculpt the pieces for my dolls. So I've just rolled out a little worm in the clay that you're using, and you know, the tips have a point to them, and I'll just go around and do it in two pieces, the bottom waterline and the top waterline. So I ended up doing the top waterline of this particular eye a couple of times because it just wasn't sitting right and I wasn't happy with it. So yeah, if you're not happy with it, just take it off, do it again. There's no big deal, no rush. So always give it a go if you're not happy. And moving on to the fur texture, and I'm using that little pin tool and just dragging that tool across the surface of the clay to create a fur texture. So I'm just adding some definition to the brow line because I wasn't happy with the way it was looking at that point. So I'm just adding two larger sausage bits, and I'll end up blending it when I put the fur texture on. So as you can see, I'm just sort of digging and blending in that brow line. So it's not such a harsh transition, and you know, it's a really great way when you're adding fur texture to blend pieces in, so you don't have to ruin your piece by sticking your finger on it. Now, I get a lot of questions why I actually fur my pieces if I'm just going to stick some faux fur over the top, and I do it for two reasons. One, it gives the fur something to stick to, and secondly, I like to use the fur as a fur direction, so it lets me know which way I should apply the fur to begin with. I lied, there's another reason. I just find it blends the final piece in a little better than having just a blank background, and it makes me feel like the piece is finished. So for the feet and the hand parts, I'm going to be sculpting in epoxy sculpt, and this is a two-part epoxy that you equally divide and mix together, and it hardens with air, so it doesn't need to be baked in the oven or anything. It is quite pricey, but it is quite strong as well. So you'd be able to find this in any specialty craft stores. Probably the art stores are more likely to have it, or even stores that sell moulding and casting materials. And like I said, it is expensive, but it's definitely worth it. And also comes in a variety of different colours. This one is just a plain grey colour. Now, the reason why I chose to do epoxy sculpt with this is because I needed to use the actual hand pieces from the figure that the customer sent to me, and I was concerned that if I use Sculpey, because that has to be baked in the oven, I was concerned that the pieces would melt and that a wrist joint would then melt and become useless and I wouldn't be able to use it again. So I went for the epoxy sculpt because it is air dry over any sort of air dry clay, because it is strong and durable. So what I did was I just covered the whole hand piece with that epoxy sculpt, and I sculpted out some paws, and then refined the sculpt a little bit, and I just made sure that none of that epoxy sculpt actually went over that ball joint, because then it renders the wrist piece useless and you can't articulate it anymore. So it's something to keep in mind if you're sculpting an action figure like this. So for the nail pieces, I used that same translucent Fimo that I used for the teeth, and I actually pre-baked little shards of that Fimo so it would represent the claws. Alright, so same deal with the feet. I just ended up covering the feet with that epoxy sculpt and then refining the feet out. So I was originally going to sculpt the feet on the body, but it popped off, so I just decided to continue on with sculpting it off the leg. And the same deal, just make sure none of that epoxy sculpt gets into that ball joint, otherwise you won't be able to move the feet and it'll probably make the standing pretty hard. So the customer asked me to apply some of that fur onto the pieces as she thought I'd do a better job. So I did that for her, and then she was going to finish it off with any patterns and colouring that her fur suit has. So as you can see here, how the head has range of motion. It still has a full range of motion, which I'm pretty happy with. I haven't attached the head yet because I just wanted it to make it easy for the customer to put any outfits and painting easier for her. And you can see the pieces of the legs. I still have full articulation and also the hands. And you can have a quick look here of what that little joint looks like. So I don't know how the customer ended up attaching the head, but you can see I left it off and it's easily pop on. Alright, I think that's it from me today. I hope you learnt a thing or two. If you did, leave it in the comments down below. If you have any requests, also leave that in the comments down below. Don't forget to check me out on Instagram and Facebook at Creatures of Nat. And don't forget to smash that subscribe button. And I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!